So in my last couple of videos, other than the ones that I've uploaded recently, which I collabed with a friend of mine, you should go check out his channel, it's Under the Lens, I've done an AI voice which people don't seem to love. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and do a voiceover this time. So sorry for how unprofessional this sounds. Anyway, let's get to the video. When going into Little Nightmares 2, I hoped for a near duplicate of the first game, but with the obvious story and encounter changes. Turns out the developers took a look at the game inside and thought, that seems interesting, let's try and make a duplicate of that, but with our little stylistic changes. You could argue that genres of these types of games are so similar that they are bound to cross over a little, but in Little Nightmares 1, they didn't really have that issue. It was quite easily able to hold its own against other platform-like games. I'm not saying that the game is bad because of this, it's just a little disappointing that there was loads of hype on my end to play this game, and I felt a little let down from the originality of it. Compared to the first game, I feel like the game lost its way a little bit. It's like the developers knew that they wanted to make a second one, but struggled with the story progression, so kind of just went down the easiest route. In the first game, you're in an alley that isn't really an alley at all. You eventually find out you're on a boat. How you got there, no one knows, but that was half of the beauty. At the beginning of Little Nightmares 2, you're in a forest, which at this point for platform-like games is kind of generic. Though the developers did put a little spin on things and have a bunch of TVs in the background, which at first I was a little bit like, why are there TVs in the woods? But then as you progress through the game, you find out why, and the reason can quite frankly fuck off. Much like the beginning of the last game, you're not told what the controls are or when you can move, but if you've played the last game, then you fully well know that when your character stood up he can move, and you briefly know what the controls are depending on how long ago you played the game before. The one thing that I noticed right at the beginning of this game is that the first level acts a lot more like a tutorial than in the first one. Throughout Little Nightmares 2, there are a lot more hints compared to the first game. I think I was only given 1 or 2 hints, if that, in the first one, but throughout this entire playthrough, even though it might not seem like a lot, there are about 4 or 5 times I got told the obvious things to do in a situation, which kind of pushed me out of the moment at that time in the game. It's kind of like when you're told to do something that you were already going to do and now you're like, well, I don't want to do that now. But because it's a game, you kind of have no choice because it's forcing you to do the thing in order to progress through the level. So you have to do the equivalent of biting your in-game tongue, and you have to do what it says. Not that you want to. Now, I'm going to try and veer from seeing the bad side of this game, because though I've kicked this video off with the disappointments, I would still highly suggest that you play this game. Could you tell I was trying really hard not to keep on saying game loads of times? Though I said the story had lost its way a bit, the mechanics are still very much the same, even with a few spicy touches. Like for example, there is now combat in the game, which at first I wasn't sure about, but when you lose your friend and you start to feel alone like at the beginning of the level, you muster the courage to be like, fuck you, Pinocchio. Right, so I'm going to go back to the thing that I glossed over quickly, which is now that you have a friend in this dingy dark world, which I thought was a very interesting change in format from the developers. But with this comes good things and bad things. First, the good things. When you're lost for direction, sometimes your companion will lead you in the right direction. How they know the right direction is beyond me, but at the end of the day, it is a game, so... This now opens up the possibility of having to achieve things as a team, whereas if you were in the world alone, you wouldn't be able to do those certain things. With this new companion comes a new emotional connection. If/when your companion is hurt or taken from you, you want to actively go and help and /find them. It gives you a second purpose, rather than just having to survive through each level with increasingly creepy enemies with different creepy abilities, like these motherfuckers. I intuitively named these assholes Giraffe Girl and Spider Pig. Now with the bad things. This was also a good point before, but after a while, with your friend leading everywhere you go, you start to feel like you're the companion in your own game. You can't make any decisions or mistakes for yourself to learn from and to therefore progress for the game. It starts to get frustrating, much like the constant hint reminders. Now going back to more generic gameplay, I'm not sure if it's because I'm not as skilled a gamer as I thought I was, or if it's because some of the levels don't have enough direction to them. Right at the very beginning, there is an obstacle that you have to avoid. This obstacle is a massive fuck off log. At first you're just like, run! Then this turns out to fail, which then you try and overthink it and try hide under here. Oh yeah, this will work. Wrong. Oh, maybe I got it wrong. Let's try one more time. So after all of that, you go back to just pegging it, and it turns out that it should have worked the entire time. So then you're just left there thinking, the fuck, bro? There are loads of other moments like this throughout the game, and it always seems to turn out after a bit which is flowed very well. So when you get to another moment like this, after you being able to successfully navigate yourself through the game, it kicks you out of the moment a little bit, especially because you know it's going to be another one of those moments, and slowly but surely the game turns into one of those rage games. Now that I mention it, the moments don't even need to be parts where you need to think on your feet. Some of the mechanics are kind of broken, and when it comes to puzzles that should be really easy, you go to do the logical thing and then it doesn't work and you get really confused. I had a moment like this in the hospital. I saw this electric plugged thing and I knew that I needed to pull it out from here and put it over there, but when I went to pull it out, nothing happened, so I thought maybe there's something else, and went around the entire room breaking everything or seeing if there was a second plug that I needed to use. After a stupidly long amount of time, for the first time in the game, I actually stopped and looked online for a walkthrough, and it turns out I was right. For fuck's sake. One more thing I would like to bitch about is the depth of field in this game, and when it comes to guessing where ropes are placed. There have been so many times where I've gone to jump for a piece of rope and it's been in the wrong place, but it looks right. It was mainly in this scene in the school where time and time again I tried to jump for the rope, and it just so happened I thought to do it wrong on purpose that my character then suddenly grabbed it. You could take everything I have said so far for reasons as to not to play the game, or you could see it as I played the game regardless of these faults because, as I've said before, this game is actually really good. Though the playtime is only roughly just over 5 hours, there is enough there to justify playing it. Smaller games like this are always nice to use as a breather from larger games in your game library. Let's talk a little bit more about the combat. Without knowing, you're introduced to the possibility of combat basically at the very beginning of the game. Though in this situation you're hitting a stick against a bear trap, and there is no thought in your mind that in the future you may be doing the same thing but against these motherfuckers. All of this then eventually leads to a boss battle at the end of the game, which I'm not sure how I fully feel about. Little Nightmares to me is the type of game where you face your fears, but not directly, if that makes sense. You're meant to hide and trick these characters, but not attack them directly. This very well may be a different approach from the developers, but I just don't want them to veer too far away from the beaten track that is Little Nightmares. You can't go through a Little Nightmares game without talking about the art style and scenes. This is the one thing that developers do seamlessly that lets you know that you're playing a Little Nightmares game. It's creepy, dingy and atmospheric. When you go into open areas, you wish you were in smaller ones so that you could keep hidden from any possible enemies that might want to hurt you because you're so small. Hats. Because why not? There were collectibles in the first game, but this was grabbing a specific looking vase and breaking it. But in this game, you collect hats. This is kind of interesting, though I could have played the game without it, other than the time I found a police hat towards the end after the main dude took my friend and I was like one of those troubled cops that worked outside of the law to get justice. Also, I know they're meant to be collectibles and in hidden places, but it would have been nicer if the hats were in more obvious locations. There was this one time I thought I'd be able to pick up this paper boat hat looking thing, but then it wasn't a hat, so I thought it might have been a cameo from the film It, because there was a water grate nearby.
Hiya, Georgie.
So then I tried to put it near that, but then still nothing really happened. Before I go into the next segment of this video, I'd like to point out some similarities between Little Nightmares 2 and Little Nightmares 1. When you come off the beach and make it to the next level, I guess you could call it, you enter this house and there is an empty set of clothes hanging from a TV. This bears resemblance to earlier on in Little Nightmares 1 where you enter a room where a man looks like he has hung himself. There are other scenes like this dotted throughout the game, and it pays a nice little homage to the first game. Now the title of this video is how nope Little Nightmares is, so rather than talking about the mechanics, I'm going to go into the reasons as to why this game is so good, and that is because of these motherfuckers. In order of encounter, we first have this asshole. The music, the sound effects, the atmosphere, everything makes me want to just go, nope, N-O-P-E, nope, nope, nope. It's situations like this that make you actually want to go, nah, I want to try and overcome this, or see where this goes. Now I kind of relate to the people in horror films that go towards the creepy noise in the house when I'm actually yelling at the TV, what are you doing? Go, run, go in the other direction. Connected to this snake-necked creep are these little puppet clay children that look a little bit like if Pinocchio was a demon. When I first saw these kids, I thought they were similar to the gnomes in the first game, scared of the monsters and just trying to live. Turns out they're a whole enemy on their own with annoying encounters and traps that they have set up for you, and you don't know what the triggers are until you've died about 12 times. After a while, these traps become a bit of an annoyance. Now, later on in the Haunted School of Death, there is a bit where you have to cross the classroom without being caught, which is easy enough if you're patient. It's when you get to the room the other side that you need to worry. So you go into this room and you see the key at the top and you're like, cool, I'll climb this bookshelf, which then triggers it to fall. At this point, these types of encounters seem a bit tedious and just seem like the developers want to bully the player. But then when you calm down a bit and you figure out that the developers have done this so that you can figure out a different way of getting the key, and by doing it this different way triggers Mrs. Trunchbull to do this. Skipping over a bunch of stuff, there is a counter further down the road in this level which plays to the strengths of this demon snake person. You have to jump through these bookshelves that she can easily look around, so you need to keep on moving to keep out of sight, which is very intense. One thing that I've already mentioned is the combat system, but up until now you don't realise how much they were going to implement of it. But then you jump into this arena and you have to fend for your life against the demon children. Thankfully we're up to the last bit of the snake bitch, but it's by far the most intense. After passing her with a piano, she can now suddenly hear like a bat, and she can hear you open a grate in the top of the room. This then leads to a situation where you need to run for your life, but you can't run at your full speed, which is everyone's absolute worst nightmare. Between the school and the hospital there is a nice little
Whoa, whoa. Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
moment where your friend puts on the yellow jacket from the first game, which makes you go, oh no way, that's that thing. But then it makes you feel something else completely different later, but I won't go into that too much because I feel like I've spoiled a little bit too much of this game already. Now, if you thought the school was terrifying, you are not prepared for the hospital. So in the first game, by default, you get this little flip light in case there's a situation where there is no light. What they have done in this game is that depending on the level, you can now have a special object, which in this case is a torch. And if you have played any horror game ever, everyone knows that a torch is never a good sign. I'm not sure if the developers foreshadowed the hospital by having supposed dead but not dead moving people in the other levels, but when you get into the hospital, because you've seen all of that, you're sure that the bodies are not going to move. But by God are you wrong. The first thing that can fuck off about this level are these motherfuckers. I hated these things so much that when I killed the first one, I hit it loads more than I should have, which then even got me an achievement. But that's not all. When you finish with these guys, you then have to deal with these. At this point, I'm not sure which one's worse, but specifically after that bit of the level, I literally had to stop and just take a breather because just nah. Going on to what you could call the boss of this level, in the grand scheme of things, he's not all that creepy, but his face speaks for itself. To be fair, the noises he makes isn't the best either. I'm not sure if it's because he's genuinely not that creepy, or if it's because the people we have faced before him are just far, far worse. So I'm now going to bring this video to a close by saying, all in all, Little Nightmares 2 isn't the best, but also isn't the worst sequel in the world. There are some aspects of the game I wish were more thought out, and I hoped for more similarities to the first game, but I admired the developers for trying to make a standalone game in what I guess we can now call a series. This is definitely a game that I suggest you play and make your own opinions on, and when you do, maybe come back here and post them in the comments, unless you already have played the game, and maybe decide to then put them in the comments anyway. But at the end of the day, I'm not your mum, so I guess you can do what you like. Right, Jesus Christ, oh my god, that was a very, very long script. It took me the weekend to gain the energy to actually read out this entire script, but if you're here at the end, thank you for watching it all the way through. This is the first video I've scripted and also voiced. After the success of the Halo video that me and my friend did, me and him are definitely going to get together and make some more content for you guys. Thank you so much for the interest burst, I guess. It fills me with great confidence for the future, and hopefully we can continue making more content.